I never even done an interview with anyone before. You're like the very first person. Buenas tardes, mis amigos, y bendiciones para todos ustedes. Hello, my name is Charity Hagenaars, and I'm here today with Charlie Stevens.
Hi guys, buenas tardes.
So we're going to talk about Bitcoin. Okay, well, I didn't know anything about Bitcoin until a couple months before July 2023.
Okay.
I didn't know about on-chain. I didn't know about Lightning. I didn't know about hardware, software. I didn't know that. I figured there's other people out there like me also didn't know that. So let's just start with the beginning. Can you briefly explain what Bitcoin is for someone totally new to cryptocurrency?
Okay, well, I might just introduce myself very briefly.
That's a good idea, too.
Yeah, just so that people have a bit of context as to who the hell they're listening to. My name is Charlie Stevens. I studied maths and finance in Dublin and worked as an actuary for a few years. But I've been studying and saving for my family as well since 2017 in Bitcoin. And I'm deeply interested in markets, deeply interested in money and the history of money. And El Salvador was the only place to go to work within Bitcoin. I sold Bitcoin across Europe for many years until the banks were closing down on me.
Oh.
So I wanted to be able to find
that's interesting.
Where I could do business properly with a money that is unalterable, like Bitcoin.
Yes.
So that's just to give people a bit of context. I've got my own business, Schelling Point, with Quentin, who's the general manager for Mi Primer Bitcoin.
Oh, okay. I've heard of that. Yes.
So we're the two owners of Schelling Point, and we focus on security for Bitcoin and then planning for Bitcoin. So because it's your responsibility as money, you need to take the adequate measures to be able to have it secure enough so that nobody else can take it from you or that you don't lose it. Because once you lose it, it's gone. It's not like a bank account where if someone scams you can call up the bank and you can get it back. It's completely your responsibility.
I think that's what scares people the most.
Of course, there's going to be trade-offs to having sovereignty. Sovereignty being the ability to not have to ask for permission to be able to spend or save any money.
Oh.
So
I've heard some stories. Actually, it was Hannah told me a story about a guy going to the bank in the UK, wanting to withdraw, I think it was only 2,000 British pounds. And they're like, why do you want that money? Well, I want to buy my son a motorcycle. Well, I don't think we should give you that money. They just take your money. Even one time I was moving my RSP from the bank to where I was buying gold with it, and I thought I'd keep a little bit out to pay some debt. And I said, I just want to keep 10,000 of that. And they're like, why? I was like, I want to pay off my credit card. Like, why does it matter to them, right? They need to make a note.
Yeah, once you
control your money.
Right. Once you deposit your funds at a bank account, well, even the minute you accept money for your job or for, let's say you had your own motel in your house, you charge people Canadian dollars.
Yes.
But ultimately, when you're accepting Canadian dollars, you're accepting a form of liability, something that is issued by the Central Bank of Canada, which is ultimately owned by them.
Right.
They're saying they owe you purchasing power by giving you this note, essentially. But they have control over the Canadian dollar and its value, as well as the interest rate on the Canadian dollars.
And how much is in circulation at any time.
Exactly, which influences its purchasing power ultimately. For a set amount of goods and services and an increasing money supply, you're always going to get inflation, which we saw clearly during and after the COVID event.
Yes, COVID.
I mean, 40% of all circulating money in the world was printed in the last 5 years.
That is mind-boggling.
There's $24 trillion of circulating currency. 12 trillions of those.
Does that mean 40% of our purchasing power has been lost since COVID? Does that equate the same way?
If in a very simplistic and oversighted way, you could say that. But ultimately, the rate at which we produce things it keeps getting better because of technology, right? Before to be able to cultivate tomatoes, you need to use your hands and tools, manual tools. Now you have large machines. Yeah,
maybe not here.
Yeah, no, of course.
Up the side of a volcano. I don't know how they ever get a factory up there.
Right. But so naturally, prices of things should be coming down because we get better and better at producing it. But the way the whole system is structured is that we need to have inflation. We need to have inflation in order for people to be able to pay back their debt, because the whole world runs on debt. So that's just a complete overview of the financial system, where it doesn't incentivize you to save, right?
Right.
You don't want to,
because the money you put in today, I put in $1,000 in the bank, but in a year's time, I can't buy the same $1,000 item I could today a year from now because of inflation.
Exactly. And if you look at how many Canadian dollars it took for you to be able to purchase a house maybe 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, I
And-
talk about this all the time. When I bought my first condo, it was $125,000 ish, and my salary at the time was, I think, $80,000. So it was a little over one of my year's salaries, which seems manageable. Like you could eventually pay it off. And then now people buy homes. Like my friend just bought a house, and it was $900,000, whatever it was.
Wow.
I'm like, you don't make near that. You make like maybe 120,000. So it's going to be
many more multiples.
8 times more than it would have cost, only 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. So the divergence between people's wages and prices of houses has gone massive. But you look at for that same condo that you bought for $120,000, to be able to purchase that condo 5 years later, it would have maybe cost 200,000, 300,000 Canadian.
Yeah, probably at least,
At least, right? For the same condo.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Even though people they were making many, many more condos across Canada during that course. It's not like the supply of condos went down.
Well, the people that came into Canada may have made it look like the supply of condos went down.
Right.
Massive immigration.
I suppose, which obviously is affecting.
That's the demand part of the supply demand.
You have to figure out whether really did the demand increase 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Or was there something else in the background, being the Canadian dollar itself?
Well, there's definitely something in the background. They call it the Vancouver Model. It's named after a city in Canada. Yeah. It's where the gangsters of Canada, which is the drug dealers and stuff, they all want to launder their money. So they put it in real estate. So they buy a home that may have been really only worth $300,000. They buy it for $400,000. And then the guy down the street's like, oh, that house just sold for $400,000. I'm going to list mine for $450,000. And then maybe the next money laundering guy actually buys the house for $450,000, or they buy them from each other too. And they just inflate the prices. So everyone around them thinks my house is worth that much more.
But at the end of the day, what's really happening is that there's just tons of more money in the system as well. There's way more Canadian dollars, so everyone has access to more Canadian dollars. The government workers are getting wage increases. People have a larger ability to take credit out, so they can take larger loans with less reputability of being able to take out those loans. That brings in more money into circulation. Mm-hmm. And those banks, every time they make a loan, they make that money out of thin air.
Exactly.
So when you when you make it a loan, you're essentially creating out of thin air. Mm-hmm. You just have certain reserve requirements as a bank.
I don't even know if they control that
over time as well. So it's like you're playing this game that's under the changing rules of these politicians that you don't really trust or know, and you're like, why am I playing this money game?
Yeah.
When I can actually not play it,
Never trust a politician.
Right. Yeah. So that's where people start to look at Bitcoin and be like, well, this doesn't inflate, and there's nobody that changes the rules of this money, and I can play this game, and everybody else plays by the same rules as me, and we all know that these rules can never change, and that gives you a real good sense of certainty about the future. Right. Where okay, well, I can save in this scarce money that no one can tell me how to use it, how much I can have, where I can move it, how I can purchase things. Yes. And I know that it's never going to be devalued.
And if I take my crypto out, nobody is asking me to bank, what are you going to use that money for?
Right.
Nobody says you can't buy something with it.
Exactly.
Although I got to say, my bank was pretty upset, we'll say, when I moved the money out of my account and was moving it to the exchange.
Of course.
They called so why are you doing this? I don't know. They didn't say that blatantly, but that's what they meant. Why are you doing this? And then I said, well, because I had to give a reason. Like, it's none of your friggin' business, but I'm going to buy a house. Oh, well, are you transferring this Bitcoin directly to a person? Do you know the house? Do you know the real estate agent? I'm like, to be honest, I don't even have a house in mind yet, but I want the money there when I'm ready. Oh, okay. It's okay then. But they wanted to really make sure I wasn't giving it away to somebody who was trying to commit fraud on me. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which in some people would be like, well, that's great, fraud. But at the end of the day, do you really want someone calling you up whenever you're moving your money around?
Yeah, exactly. Monitoring every cent I spend.
Right. And a lot of people, the laws of the place that you're in, you might not be in agreement with those laws yourself. And
exactly.
For you to have any freedom to move out, you need money. You need to be able to purchase things. So you need some sort of money that you can use without having to ask for permission. So that if, for some reason, an authoritative power comes and takes control of whoever sets the laws in your jurisdiction, that you can get out of there, or that you can have power where they don't have the unilateral ability to stop.
So explain to people, what is Bitcoin exactly?
So Bitcoin was created to combat central banks, and I think to understand Bitcoin, one needs to understand what a central bank's job is.
Right.
And what, every single country in the world basically has a central bank, bar maybe two.
Okay.
Like central banks' jobs effectively is to be able to maintain unemployment under a certain amount, keep inflation at 2%, and to be able to protect consumers and investors from fraud within the financial markets, and to make sure there's a functioning financial system. They usually do that alongside other institutions like financial regulators. But the central bank was created, first one was created in the 1600s in the Netherlands, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Netherlands basically was one of the most powerful nations with the Dutch East India Company. And the central bank was a way to be able to manage all the regional banks within the Netherlands. But in 1913, in the United States of America, the Federal Reserve was created, basically monopolizing the money printing within the United States.
In 1913, so just before the war? No,
Exactly.
or in the...
That first war.
Okay.
Just before the First
Just
World
before
War.
the First World War.
And there's no coincidences with that, because how is the war funded? Essentially, the government borrows from the central banks, which creates the money itself. And for the central bank to be able to print and for that money to have complete power, they need to have a monopoly and not allow for other banks to print money. Because if there was competition between banks of whose money is better, whichever bank actually was responsible with their money and actually was able to give you the gold for every time that it gave you, you gave it a receipt, people would trust that bank more than one that was basically giving out too many receipts for the amount of gold it had.
So I know the dollar bill used to say that it was redeemable for, $1 worth of gold.
Yeah.
Was that taken out in 1913 when the central bank came in?
1913.
Or is that when the gold standard came off, the gold standard in the 70s?
It was still on until the 1930s. And then in the 1930s, what happened, they put in a 10-year basically law saying if you had any gold personally, you were going to go to jail for 10 years.
Oh, yes, I remember that, the ban on the gold.
Yeah, so you needed to give in your gold in order...
But it didn't count for jewelry. I think somebody... Just coins and...
Yeah, any ways of you storing value. So in that, that's fine. So they were trying to basically take away people's ability to accumulate capital, essentially. And for the central bank and the government to have a complete monopoly over who had what and how much their income was in order to be able to tax and keep the country running, because that's their only income tax, essentially. So then with that, I don't want to bore the listeners too much, but it came to 1971, when the government decoupled gold with the US dollars.
Was that Nixon, right? Wasn't it that?
Nixon, yeah. Before 1971, no individual could redeem their dollars for gold, but other central banks across the globe could do it. It was on a country level standard. And then, so ultimately since then, the value of the dollar and every other currency that exists in the world is being devalued on a regular basis. And I'm sure a lot of listeners know that right now. But this is to give a bit of context of what Bitcoin was invented for. It was to be able to solve the problem of having to trust an institution or a government to be able to issue the currency that we use to value and to transact goods and services. That problem has been a problem for centuries and millennia. And in 2008, after the global financial crisis, Bitcoin was released. And it was released in the aim to be able to take over as a global monetary base and for us to be able to use Bitcoin to value things, to transact.
So, and nobody really does know who Satoshi Nakamoto is?
No, which actually is a huge aspect to Bitcoin, because if there's no individual creator, there's no one to chop their heads off. No one can chop the head off of the creator.
Oh, that makes sense.
The plan.
To stop it,
But now it's gotten so big.
That's pretty strategic.
It's people say it's quite sacrificial in Satoshi's, because he still has 1 million Bitcoin under his
so I guess,
which would be making him one of the richest men in the world, and he hasn't moved the money. So there's
at the moment he does, I'm sure there's
panic, right?
Wow.
No, once you
and if he didn't
pass it on,
exactly. Yeah. Well, maybe we get into some of that here.
So just to conclude, Bitcoin then was created and released, and people are able to save in it. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. All you need is a device and an internet connection, and you're able to receive Bitcoin. You don't need to go through any bank. You don't need to ask for permission you can save in it and you can use it no matter what, which is a huge, huge point for any person who believes in freedom, individual rights, the ability to impose what.
Right, that's sovereignty, individual sovereignty. Okay, so there's a question that many people ask: is Bitcoin still legal tender in El Salvador after the change?
No, but what is legal tender? The legal tender is the ability to pay back your taxes in Bitcoin for it to be obligatory for all vendors and individuals to have to sell their products and services for this currency. Now, as it being legal tender before the change of the law, the law said that everyone had to accept Bitcoin, but in reality that wasn't the case whatsoever. 99 or maybe 97% of places didn't accept
exactly.
Bitcoin. So in reality, nothing really has changed. No one was paying their taxes in Bitcoin. No one was obligated to receive their goods and services in Bitcoin. And all of the main changes that were happening with regards to Bitcoin or education being done or adoption was all on the private side, not on the public side. The government didn't make any efforts for education. The government didn't really push it or promote it. They didn't enforce any laws. And all they did was basically switch the law, change the law so that it was in line with reality. But for myself, I use Bitcoin every single day for everything.
Oh.
For everything. I don't use a dollar.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So only when I leave Berlin do I have to use a dollar.
Right, because Berlin is its own little
community, Bitcoin community.
It's a little circular economy.
Exactly. Like I arrived 2 years ago. There was about 15 places accepting. There wasn't any expats at all.
So 2 years. So Nikki and James, I think they were just moving out there when we came in July.
Yeah.
I didn't end up meeting them. I think they were going back and forth or something.
They arrived about 2 weeks after myself.
Okay.
Yeah. So then myself, Nikki and James, and then Corrado and Evelyn, who were the founders. They were a Salvadoran couple. We then took charge of being able to expand adoption.
Okay.
So I was, basically leading adoption in terms of getting to the vendors and explaining them what Bitcoin was.
Right.
And then doing classes and making sure that there was broad knowledge of Bitcoin. Now there's Bitcoin symbols everywhere.
Right.
All the students in the schools understand the basis of inflation and money, what Bitcoin is.
That's key.
And there's over 2,000 people using Bitcoin with Lightning wallets. And I mean, it's just the volume, it's flowing quite a lot. So.
Okay, so let's get into that because you mentioned wallet, and I know I have a question here about wallets, but a couple more things. So what are the most trusted platforms or apps to buy Bitcoin with? If people are new and know nothing, I knew nothing. It was actually Ryan who told me to get a blue wallet, and I didn't know what a blue wallet was from a red wallet, if there is such a thing. Or an orange wallet, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Ryan is brilliant for any knowledge or anything with regards to Bitcoin. But what I would suggest, your question is about buying Bitcoin specifically. So in order to buy Bitcoin, you need to send Canadian dollars. So it needs to have a link or whatever currency that you are coming from.
Right.
When you say buy Bitcoin, you're basically exchanging Bitcoin for another state-issued currency. So, so whatever platform you're using needs to be able to connect to your bank. And the problem with a lot of jurisdictions is that their banks do not like to work with exchanges or places that sell Bitcoin.
I've seen that.
Because they don't want their capital moving from their state-issued currency to one that's outside of their currency because they lose power. So you have to be aware of what your bank's policy is and what your jurisdiction's attitude is. What I recommend to people is to focus on Bitcoin and to not be distracted by every single other crypto coin that exists. Bitcoin is the only money that will exist down the line. It is the whole reason for why it's all so valuable. The mission of being the global money, you do not need two monies. And a lot of people are trying to replicate Bitcoin. A lot of people are trying to make it again with all these different coins. So there's a lot of exchanges who make most of their money from trading these coins. So I'd suggest if you find an exchange that solely focuses on Bitcoin, then I'd highly recommend it. In Canada, a really, really good app that's Bitcoin only is called Bull Bitcoin.
That's the one I use. That's one Ryan recommended. And it's in the name. Bull Bitcoin, not Bull Monero or whatever.
No, exactly. So Bull Bitcoin is a really good one for Canadians. And in the States, it's Strike or River.
Okay. Oh, River. I didn't hear that one. So what I try to tell people when they talk about, well, what does the Bull Bitcoin app charge you? I actually was trying to explain this to my husband. It's just like when you have 1,000 Canadian dollars and you go into an exchange place. I would say, I want American dollars. They said, well, today I'm going to give you $700 American for that. And then you walk out the door and you're like, oh, you know what, I'm not going to go to the States or El Salvador. I'm going to get my Canadian dollars back. You don't give them the $700 American and expect to get 1,000 Canadian because they need to make money. They've just paid the employees to be there for you, right? So now they're giving you back 950. So you just lost $50 in that exchange. And that's how the Bull Bitcoin app works, right? Bitcoin may be $105,000, but you want to buy it through them, maybe it's $106,000. And then if you want to sell it, you're going to sell it for $104. They're going to make money in the exchange.
The exchange itself is paying for the regulation compliance, the employees, the developers who develop the app itself.
To keep it all running 24/7.
Exactly. They pay for employees to actually educate their customers about Bitcoin because that's necessary. Yeah. So, there are basically points.
You had to pay for the service.
Yeah, and the convenience of actually purchasing Bitcoin. There's always fees related to getting into Bitcoin. But once you're in Bitcoin,
but then that's it. Once you're in Bitcoin, you could give someone cash if they need cash, and they give you Bitcoin in exchange.
Exactly.
You don't have to use an exchange. You just use your phones.
Exactly. You can be here in El Salvador. You can bring cash up. If you wanted to bring US dollars to El Salvador, you could go to Berlin. You can hand cash, and you get Bitcoin in exchange. No problem.
And you can put it in the Chivo ATM.
Exactly.
That's what we actually tried it out when we were here in July 2023. My husband had $600. He put it in. We put it on my wallet. I'm like, wow, that was easy. I don't think the Chivo takes a cut, do they? Or did they? I don't know now that things have changed.
Very low. But
because when I take cash out, because I need to pay the rent and whatever, the fee is usually like $1.30 something. $1 is $1 something. But I think that's more. I don't think that's Chivo so much as the network. Yeah, exactly.
So every time you make a transaction, there's
you're going to pay the miner.
Yeah, exactly. The miner, their whole purpose is basically to secure the blockchain.
Maybe you want to explain what blockchain is?
Yeah, so the way Bitcoin works is it's limited. There's only 21 million coins. And the way that it's limited like that is the way for new Bitcoin to be created, it needs to be mined. And when I say mined, all mining is basically computers. Around the world, there's tons of miners that are trying to guess a really, 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 really long number that takes a lot of guesses to be able to get it, to get it. Okay. And to be able to guess, you need computing power or energy. And that's why it's basically, it's egalitarian in the sense that all you can do is increase the amount of watts or the processing power of that computer to be a better miner. Right. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do, what your name is, what your skin color is, whatever. It's all based on pure, raw power.
Right.
Bitcoin started with every 10 minutes, there would be a new block. So, it's a very big topic, but Bitcoin has these things called blocks within them. And in each block, you have all of the transactions within those 10 minutes that happen all across the globe. Okay. And for a new block to be in the blockchain, so there's, now there's about 880,000 blocks since its inception. Okay. On average, every 10 minutes, you have a block. Inside the block.
880,000? Really? Yeah, every 10 minutes since 2008-ish?
2009.
2009, wow.
So if you get, that's like 10 minutes in an hour, 6 times 24, whatever.
Okay, wow. It seems like it should be way bigger.
The number?
Well, 880 for all those years have gone by.
Yeah, well, if we divide 880,000 divided by
That's okay, I trust your math.
It does seem small, though.
It does seem small. How many years have gone by since 2009?
Yeah.
Well, okay, my son was born in 2009. He's going to be 16 next week. So 16 years. That number does not seem for every 10 minutes. Wow. And that whole blockchain is stored on every miner's computers, right?
Not even a miner, but you yourself can use your computer and you can actually store every single transaction from the beginning. And that can all be stored within 1 terabyte, which is just a hard drive.
Really?
Yeah, that's why these are all aspects of Bitcoin where each block has a limit of 1 megabyte and you have all the transactions within that block.
Okay.
Yeah, I can make a transaction to you, but in order for me to make a transaction to you, it needs to go into one of these blocks.
Right.
And for it to go into one of these blocks, a miner needs to get the transaction and put it into the block.
So it comes out of your app.
Yeah, so you
need an internet connection, obviously, then.
Right, and you need a thing called a node, which is just a computer.
Right.
Basically saying, oh, this person has, or this address has sent Bitcoin to this address. And then that just talks to the whole network, and the whole network is like, okay, they've made a transaction, and everybody updates their computer.
Right, and everyone keeps a copy of it.
Exactly.
This is why it's the unbreakable thing, right?
But the miner is the ultimate person who says this is on the blockchain,
Right.
and this is the single source of truth that everybody is going to abide by.
Like when I take money out of the Chivo ATM, I have to wait for it to have, I think, 3 confirmations.
Okay.
So that's like 3 nodes or whatever, 3 miners have said, yes, we agree, this money.
No, 3 confirmations is basically 3 blocks have been confirmed. So so
3 blocks have gone by, but my transaction is only one of the blocks.
Exactly, your transaction is one of the blocks.
Okay.
And then 2 other blocks need to have confirmed before it lets you to be able to take it. That's in an exchange, and they do that because it's a level of, they're trying to increase their level of security, but because
I thought it was like 3 copies had to be, like 3 people had to agree out there that transaction really happened.
Yeah.
And not just make something up, right?
Yeah, it sounds like that because it says confirmation.
Yeah, because I'm confirmation. Yeah. I confirm it's true. You know, I swear in the Bible. You know.
But these blocks, to be able to confirm them, the miners need to guess the answer, and to guess the answer, they need a lot of power.
Right.
And that power, that energy, is what protects all of Bitcoin and single source of truth.
I guess that when the grid goes down, now we lose everything. If that ever happens.
Not necessarily, because all you need is just we can have a connection between a couple of computers here, and we can run the blockchain between us, and we can update the blockchain within us. Now
that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, once you connect into the global internet, it'll have to update and see if you've put in more energy than the rest of them,
right?
And then it actualizes itself. But even if energy goes down worldwide, Bitcoin still goes. It's like its own living being. I know it sounds crazy, but it kind of breathes and beats.
Although I think if the energy goes down for the whole entire world, we have other things to think about.
Yeah, yeah, we do. But like we can make energy.
But I'm just thinking solar. I mean, El Salvador is all sunshine, 12 hours a day.
Yeah, and
if we had a few computers and a couple of solar panels.
Yeah, you can't just stop energy across the globe because
it's true.
Just with a lemon, you can create electricity.
True.
So
yeah, I've seen that done with a potato.
Yeah, it's hard not to get deep with Bitcoin.
Yeah, I know.
But it's useful. It's useful. It's really useful. Yeah. You can save it. You can move your Canadian dollars into Bitcoin. Once you buy it from Bulk Bitcoin, then you want to put it onto a wallet that you have control over.
Right.
And that's what Ryan recommended to you, which is Blue Wallet.
Blue Wallet, yeah. So I have control over Blue Wallet, but it's still a hot wallet because it's still on the internet all the time because it's in my phone. Exactly. And then if you want to get a hardware wallet, explain what a hardware wallet is.
Yeah.
I think I do a really poor job of doing that.
No, that's really good. The hot wallet is in contrast to the cold wallet.
Right, okay.
The hot wallet means that your 12 words or your private key, which is your key to your Bitcoin, which is really important. It's your password to your Bitcoin, is on the actual device locally. Yeah. It's encrypted, but it's on the local device, and that device is connected to the internet, which means it's vulnerable to being hacked or for someone to be able to access that device and find those 12 words. That's the danger. Ultimately.
Right.
That's a hot wallet. Although it's pretty good because you have your own 12 words and you're not relying on any third party to manage your Bitcoin. So
and even if you lose your phone, there's like, well, my phone has a password. My wallet has a password.
Your phone, you lose your phone, no big deal. No big deal. You get a new phone, you've got your 12 words, which you write down on a piece of paper, and you keep it somewhere safe. You use those 12 words with the new phone, you download Blue Wallet again,
right?
And then you just type in your 12 words, and there's your money.
Could you actually have 2 phones with the wallet on both at the same time? I actually wondered that because I have 2 phones.
Yeah.
I thought about doing that.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do it.
I have to experiment.
Yeah. No, and that's what it's all about, experiment.
So if I want to protect my money better, though, getting a cold wallet, a hardware wallet, so that's a separate device.
Exactly. So a separate device, cold wallet, is essentially a device where it has your 12 words, but that device is always removed from the internet. So it never connects to the internet.
Okay.
Which gives it an extra layer of security. And to be able to spend money from your cold wallet, you need to plug it in to a source of power. And from there, then you can basically, they say, sign a transaction. You can spend your Bitcoin from that device.
So then you could, say if I took it off my Blue Wallet, put it in the hardware wallet, and then I needed a bit more, so I put them together again, I move $1,000 or something over, and now I have it back in my wallet, but I disconnect this so that's still safe. As long as that device doesn't... What happens if that device melts? Destroys itself. It melts in a fire. It's too hot in El Salvador. What happens then?
Well, that's when you have your
12 words. So it all comes down to the 12 words.
Exactly.
No matter what you put it on.
Exactly. Because all that device has is your 12 words in it. You're going to have a backup of
Okay.
12 words. So even if that
Right,
gets
if something
fired,
happens.
you can go back, you can go to your safe, you can open your safe, there's your 12 words. I can buy another device, I can
Right.
put the 12 words on, and there's your Bitcoin again.
You know, it's funny, when I took when I knew we were going to come here, I took a Bitcoin course, and I never finished it. I'm horrible at that. But it was a very long course. But the guy was saying it was a really good course, had an Excel spreadsheet with multiple stuff on it. But the first thing was a paper wallet. So you print off a paper wallet. What is that? That's your definitely offline wallet. I don't know, it has an address on the paper written down.
Well, all a wallet is basically 12 words in a row. There's a list of 2,048 words.
Okay.
And out of those 2,048 words, you put in a random 11 words, and then the 12th word is basically just a formula from the 11 words that you've already found, just as a checksum, just to verify.
Oh, okay.
So that's just the code behind it. But these 12 words, essentially, that's all you need to be able to create a wallet. So every single private key that you have, every single 12 word, that's the seed to everything. They call it a seed phrase.
A seed phrase, yes, I've heard that.
Because it's literally like a seed
right.
that everything else kind of derives from. And when I say everything else, I mean you can derive your public address, which means if you have your seed, it derives a public address, and you can receive funds into this public address.
Right, okay.
So that's what you might have with paper wallet.
Oh, okay. Interesting. You had paper wallet. I thought that was crazy sounding like, but all you needed was the words. So it could be paper, I guess.
All you need is dice, a pen, a piece of paper, and a formula.
So what you said about, the 12 words, there's a formula. You said there's 2,000 some words.
2,048 words.
And nobody's cracked everyone's wallet with that by now?
You see the permutations or the amount of combinations.
Yeah, how many would that be?
More than the amount of atoms in the universe.
Wow. You're really good with math.
That's what I studied.
That's what my husband studied too.
Right.
You think he'd be more into Bitcoin knowing the math behind it, but I don't know.
It's a combination of I suppose, analytics, but also economics and human nature. Like you have to understand our fallibility and our prone to be corrupted, because then you understand the, I suppose, ethics or the reasoning behind Bitcoin coming into the world, and for us to be able to use it and to create a new world. Right? That's ultimately the mission.
That's the New World Order, right? Not what they were talking about over there.
Yeah, that is the cool New World Order. Yeah.
You just remind me what you said about the corruption, because in the government, I remember I've been a government employee for 27 years.
Wow.
Somewhere along the way, they had a credit check added to the screening. And people were like, why would they add this?
Screening for the
to become an employee.
Okay.
And like, why would you add a credit check? Because that's it. If you owe a lot of debt, you could be corrupted. Somebody could say, I could pay you off, get rid of your debt. Or maybe you owe debt because you've already done something shady, but not like a house or a car, but I mean like gambling or something, right? But then you could be easily manipulated if you have debt. You can be corrupted. That's just human nature.
Wow.
Right? It's true. We can all be easily manipulated in that way.
So we need to put in systems in place so that we can reduce the amount of harm that we
Right. So some people want to know how much money they can get started with.
$1. $1,
yeah.
Right, you can get started.
Doesn't get you a big Bitcoin. A sliver of a Bitcoin.
No, but definitely get off zero. That's the main thing. So get yourself some Bitcoin and put it into a place that's safe, secure, somewhere that you can have control over it, and then do some study. There are tons of resources out there to be able to get started. There's platforms even like X, and now there's another platform, a protocol, Nostr, which are really good for learning about Bitcoin. We don't have to go
that's another rabbit hole right there.
But there's plenty of books. I recommend the Bitcoin Standard as a really good book to have an overview of macroeconomics and where Bitcoin kind of fits in. And there's small books like The Price of Tomorrow or The Big Print or Broken Money. Broken Money is by Lynn Alden. The Big Print is by Lawrence Lepard. You've got The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. You've got the 21 Lessons of Bitcoin by Gigi, a German philosopher, really, really good.
Wow.
You've got The Bullish Case for Bitcoin by Hijai. You've got Shelling Out by Nick Szabo, which was written in 2002. And that was basically talking about the evolution of money from the get-go, from when we were in tribes. And all of these books allow you to get a bit of context as to the nature of money and how we've used it as humans throughout civilization, and where does Bitcoin fit into that, and how it's going to serve as the base of money for the rest of human civilization.
For my kids, there's a series on Angel Studios called Tuttle Twins, and the Tuttle Twins are a little cartoon. We have the books too, but they have a whole Bitcoin cartoon about what is Bitcoin and why it's better And it all has to do with them trying to sell something at a yard sale.
Yeah.
Somebody offering them money or somebody offering them the Bitcoin. And then the person say, oh, you don't want Bitcoin, that's make-believe money. And the guy's like, you don't want cash, that's make-believe money or whatever, right? And then they have a whole thing about it. It's very, very good for kids.
A couple of days ago.
Oh, really?
With those kids. I was teaching kids.
Funny.
And it was a great one.
Yeah, I did it with my kids like a couple of years ago. Whenever it came out, my husband was like, oh, we found this. And like, okay, we have to watch it. And then we ended up watching the whole series. And we really like the Tuttle Twins.
In terms of your viewers, where are they based mostly?
United
Canada
States.
And United States.
Mostly United States,
Okay.
some Canadians, very small Salvadorians, and then other parts of the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I suggest looking for a Bitcoin meetup around wherever you are. There's plenty of them around the States. And going to a Bitcoin conference. There's one in Vegas in a couple of days, which I'll be heading to in a few days. That would be 30,000 people. If you're into social.
Go to Vegas, but not to gamble with cash, with fiat.
Yeah, Bitcoin.
You could go to learn about Bitcoin.
Exactly. So much better. And also, just get started. And if you're into reading, you can read. If you're into podcasts, there are tons of podcasts.
Yeah.
There's plenty to recommend.
Yeah.
And if you're into videos, there's also YouTube. It's a big journey, but I highly recommend it. It's not only good for your own finances, but it also shifts your way of looking at things.
Right. There was one in November, and I
organised that with Kiki and James in last November, adopting Bitcoin.
Right.
We had about 1,300 people there.
Wow.
Which is brilliant.
Wow.
And really, really good educational talks. We had about 5 stages, good food and stuff like that.
So is that every year in November?
Yeah. So 14th and 15th of November, we have Adopting Bitcoin this year.
Okay.
And then you have Economia Bitcoin, which is a conference we're organising up in Berlin, which will be around 300 people. So if people want to come up.
Good size too. Because you said you use Bitcoin every day in your life. So obviously that works if you have vendors that accept Bitcoin everywhere. So, and Berlin is the little El Salvador's microeconomy of Bitcoin right now. I thought it was Bitcoin Beach, but I'm guessing Berlin sounds like it's way more if you're using it every day.
Yeah.
Don't even use dollars, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's amazing.
That's what attracts a lot of Bitcoiners there. It's just
what about your gas, your petrol?
Yeah.
All in Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like I use Bitcoin usually when I go to PriceSmart because that's just easier it's usually a very large number for some reason. I don't know why we keep buying stuff there, but I don't want to carry all the cash, right?
Yeah, PriceSmart's pretty good.
PriceSmart's better.
You cut your hair, gas, veterinary laboratories to get your bloods checked.
Oh,
you can go to lawyers, hardware stores, construction workers, electricians, plumbers. You've got.
Was it hard to get all those services on board? Like you've only been there 2 years, right? You said 15 to now.
There's
sounds like everyone.
180 more.
Wow.
Businesses who accept.
I know when we got the Blink wallet when we first got here, it had the vendors map on there.
Right.
I never looked at where Berlin was to see. It must be booming with vendors that use Bitcoin.
I don't know if you want to check out BTC Map and you can have a look at Berlin. And BTC Map is really good for anybody who wants to actually use their Bitcoin. Someone who wants to use Bitcoin because it shows you the businesses around you that accept Bitcoin. And there's a really, really good feeling about using Bitcoin because you know how valuable it is and that you're actually giving it to somebody for their goods and services. So that's a really amazing. So
1,200.
And this is Berlin.
Wow! You guys get the most in the red. 170 it says.
Yeah. These are just around the Berlin area.
Right.
And you go in and then you can start seeing. If you go in a bit further, you keep going.
Oh yeah.
And then you start.
Oh wow.
Seeing, and there are all different types of goods and services: cafes, hotels, motels, hostels.
Yeah, like that's the pharmacy symbol. There's like a haircut restaurant.
Loads of different types of restaurants. Phone
repairs,
beauty salons, all different types of goods and services.
So there's like a flower shop or something.
Flower shop. Yeah. So everything that you really need, and because everywhere accepts Bitcoin, there's a social pressure of all new businesses to accept.
Yes, that makes sense.
It's much, much easier now to encourage people.
Because if everyone's there using it and they go to somebody who's not using it, then they're not going to get the business.
Well, yeah, exactly. So why are you not using it when it's so
I like that social pressure.
And there's a lot more Bitcoin now in Berlin, so as the purchasing power goes up for Bitcoin, the whole town gets richer on a decentralized way.
That's true.
Which is a lot of more people saving in Bitcoin, and people who may not have had the opportunity to save in an asset that appreciates at that rate before. Now they have the opportunity.
When Trump announced the tariffs and they were down to like, what was it, 78, 73 or something like that. I bought some at that rate. Now it's like 106 or whatever it was the other day. Like, wow, okay, and that money made money without me doing anything at all.
Yeah. So
My husband's all about, you buy a little bit every few days, you buy some more at whatever rate it is, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do. So.
And you're a bit smarter and you buy it when it's really low.
Well, I bought some, then I wish I would have put it all then at that time because I didn't realize, my husband figures it's going to go to 200,000 for the end of the year. What are your predictions with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I never like to give predictions on prices because you're trying to predict many different moving forces at the same time.
True.
Not only are you predicting how many more people are going to want to use Bitcoin and save in it, because that influences the price, obviously.
Right.
But also you're trying to predict how you value Bitcoin. So when we're valuing Bitcoin, we're valuing it in US dollars.
Yes.
So then if we're valuing it in US dollars, we also need to predict what the US dollar is going to do. And whoever controls the US dollar, being the Federal Reserve, what are they going to do with the amount of money that they have and interest rate? Because that ultimately influences...
And how much more will they print to stimulate the economy?
Exactly. How much more quantitative easing, or which means just increasing the amount of dollars in the system.
I remember when we came and we went to the Bitcoin farmers market and they were trying to price stuff in Satoshis, which I think is better if you say, well, this coffee is going to cost you,
2,000 sats.
Yeah, 2,000 sats. Regardless if tomorrow Bitcoin's worth more or less. If it stayed the same, then it's always that. Where the dollar, it's not, right? Coca-Cola, when I was a kid, it might have been 75 cents, and now it's like $1.50. Well, especially in Canada. It might be $2 in Canada. That went up in price, or they used to say a Campbell's soup was just something like a quarter. And over the years, it stayed the same until they started printing a lot of money. And now a Campbell's soup can might be $1.50. The soup hasn't changed. Actually, if anything, the quality probably went down, right?
It probably went down in size as well.
It probably went down in size, quality, like the shrinkflation, where they make it, it's not 350 mils, it's 325 mils. But it goes up and it's not valuable. It's not more valuable. It's still a can of soup. It didn't change at all, except maybe the quality is lower and it might have shrunk. But it's worth more. But it's not really worth more because it's still just a can of soup.
Yeah.
So you get pricing everything in US dollars is so crazy.
It's like a ruler that actually changes in size 50 centimeters. It's like, I can't measure things anymore because it keeps bending and
exactly.
getting bigger. And it's like, I'd like one ruler that just stays the same and I can use over time and space easily.
Yeah, so do you think that in Berlin are people valuing things that way, that they're in Satoshis and it doesn't change day to day regardless of the price of Bitcoin?
So that is quite an advanced way of thinking, and I'm a big proponent for people valuing their products. We have a cafe in the Bitcoin Center that values its coffees and buns and sats. Yeah. And then we also we had the standard, who was Tim, who just passed away, unfortunately, from a heart attack 2 weeks ago on his 60th birthday.
Oh, you were talking about
him. He was a huge proponent for Bitcoin, and it was a huge loss for the Bitcoin community. But he would value all of his beers and all of his dinner. He made amazing food, and he had a beautiful, beautiful garden. He valued all of his stuff in sats. And, over the course of time, as the purchasing power of Bitcoin starts to stabilize with respect to your everyday goods, people will definitely stabilize in Bitcoin prices. If anything, prices will start going down.
I was thinking that too, right? Because Bitcoin's gone up. When I first bought it in 2023, I think it was only 25,000. I'm pretty sure the first purchase I made was 25,000.
Yeah, crazy.
A long, long time ago.
Yeah.
And I was just like, let's put some money in this thing and try it out when we get to El Salvador.
Good thinking.
Then I kept adding more and more as we went and get ready for the trip, right?
Yeah.
Anytime there was spare cash, okay, now it's in Bitcoin. So when we got here, then we could pay for stuff like our shipping container with all our belongings.
Yeah, it's a nice little deposit that you have there. You know that it's there or whatever. But it's good to remember, I have this Bitcoin, this is how I use it, this is how I can get to it or whatever.
Yeah.
And then try and get a setup for yourself so that if one of you passes away, that it's onto the next person or onto the children. Or you can use your Bitcoin to start planning for big life events. Say, well, I have my pension, and we sell this motel and this hostel, and we're investing in it. But we also have this Bitcoin that we don't know how much it's going to be worth in the future, but this is secured properly so that when we need it in 10 years' time, we have it.
Right.
Which is a really, really, it makes you feel so much safer.
Other than making sure my husband has access to the 12 words, is there some other thing to do for that kind of, I don't want to put it in my will because the lawyer would see it run off my Bitcoin. Yeah. So I don't know what else to
do except to be able to give him access. Well, there's these things, this way that you can hold Bitcoin, which is called multi-signature, which means it requires multiple 12 words to be able to be released. So let's say I'm Schelling Point, and we decide, we don't do this, right? But let's say we decide to take one of the 12 words, and then you have the 12 words, and then your husband has 12 words, okay? So to be able to spend the Bitcoin, out of the 12 words, you only need 2 to spend it. Okay. So then...
Kind of like signatures on a check when you have a corporation.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So multi-signature.
If, let's say, you both can for you to be able to spend the Bitcoin, both of you need to be in agreement.
Yeah.
Let's spend this Bitcoin.
Right.
Both of you, because you both need to get your 12 words and spend it. Now, for whatever reason, if one of you lose their 12 words or lose access to it for whatever reason, or if one of you passes away and the other person didn't know that you had the 12 words, you can then come to Schelling Point or the third party and ask, oh, listen, you have our other key. Can we sign this together? Yes. Spend it. But I can't actually spend your Bitcoin by myself.
Okay. So this is a service you guys do provide or don't provide?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
But what we do is we set it up for you.
Okay.
So that you can do a setup between your own family, so that if someone does lose access to the Bitcoin, then you can access the other key and then spend it.
Okay.
So and these security models can get more complex depending on the situation. But for families, you can keep it really simple with they say a 2 of 3 multi-signature wallet.
Do the 12 words have to be in a specific order?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I got 3 kids, my husband, me. Just get them in the right order.
So as you start thinking about this a bit more and increasing your security level and understanding how systems it works, you become more confident in holding and saving in Bitcoin, and then you start feeling more empowered and less having to ask for permission from the government or less dependent of the government or anybody else.
Or the banks.
Right. And you're more likely to start to form community with the others who also hold Bitcoin and helping each other out in certain ways, which is just a really amazing thing.
I think the biggest fear that Canadians have, and it's not an unfounded fear for sure, is that your bank account's going to get froze. It happened to me.
Wow.
And it had nothing to do with the trucker convoy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that happened to me as well. Just got chopped off the money. You can't access your money anymore.
No, they took my money. They stole it on my account. The Canada Revenue Agency said, you owe money. And no, I didn't. And even though I proved I didn't later on, they're like, well, it's the time's up. We're just going to take your money. Oh, and you still owe us more. And if you don't give it to us, we're going to dock your wages or whatever, like make you sell your assets. They hold you hostage. Yeah. Well, the whole tax thing is slavery anyway, but
no, exactly.
They just steal your money right out of the bank. It's like, okay. And there was no good way to even fight it because they go to tax court, they call it, which is them. So I called, left 3 messages like, hey, someone call me back. I need to talk to you about this. They never call back. It's just all it's a big, massive scam. Exactly. And they literally just freeze your bank account. The bank's like, well, the court said we got to do it. So, okay.
That's insane.
Now my money is gone.
That is absolutely insane. Canada is a really good example. I mean, it's
a really bad example, you mean?
No, it's minted a lot of Bitcoiners. That's the thing, Canada.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
that's true. Minted a lot of Bitcoiners. It's a good way to put it.
We've just realized how,
the value of having someone not just steal your money out from underneath you.
Wow. So there you go, guys. Yeah. One ththing is realizing that, it's a scam, and then starting to move your wealth over to something that is reliable and long-term. Once you understand the basics of it, really secure and gives you certainty. And then, being able to develop that and start focusing your energy into there, and life really just gets better.
Well, I think not having to explain where you want to use your wealth to anybody. No bank questions why I spend so much at PriceSmart. Maybe my husband does. And then just having access to it all the time without having to get permission. Like Hannah mentioned about the guy getting the motorcycle. Couldn't get that much money out of the account at one time.
Or not having to have the fear that it's going to be frozen at one time.
Or stolen right out from underneath you. Yeah.
Or if you want to keep a legacy for your, children or for...
Yeah, and not have to worry about, I don't know,
taxes
inheritance, taxes, all this kind of stuff.
Taxes, passing it on to your next of kin.
Yeah.
You have your fixed.
It works best in El Salvador.
Yeah. Get over here and see what it's like and try and form another life here with similar people who have the same type of mindset.
Yeah, similar values. I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah, okay.
Don't forget to hit the like button.